Here's a list of 10 things the Catholic Church have opposed. In the 1920s, the Church opposed the common sign language for deaf Irish men and Irish women. Why? Because they couldn't have them talking to each other. That might lead to relationships, and relationships might lead to sex. But if you think that's a bit loony, in the 40s the Church opposed the introduction of tampons. Yes, women's sanitary products. Archbishop McQuaid found any airing of issues to do with the female body offensive. As his biographer John Cooney said, the man was obsessed with sex. In 1944, he wrote to the Department of Health opposing the introduction of tampons. He was especially concerned that they would be used by unmarried women, or what he called the pro-birth control women of the slums, expressing his class hatred for the working class and the poor. You see, upper class Irish people like McQuaid, who populated the church, had lived through the revolutionary years of 1916 to 1923. They knew the Irish working class could get out of control, so they needed to kick us and make sure that that never happened. It was this class hatred for working class people, a thirst for revenge, married with an ultra-conservative interpretation of the Bible and an obsession with sex, which led to these people torturing women, establishing Magdalene laundries and allowing paedophile priests to rape their way through working class areas. It was about revenge, it was about power, and it was about control. They even opposed the introduction of the mother and child scheme. In 1948, Socialist Minister Noel Browne suggested that mothers and children should get free healthcare like the NHS in Britain. Irish children were dying en masse from tuberculosis, and Noel Browne wanted to do something about TB, but the church wasn't having any of it. Bishop John Charles McQuaid summoned Noel Browne to his palace and told him about how the church was morally opposed to socialised medicine, that it was akin to communism and it was not in accord with church teaching to have women find out about gynecological matters, and so the church was okay with poor children continuing to die of tuberculosis as long as women found out nothing about their own healthcare. In the end, Noel Browne was forced to resign. The church even opposed studying in Trinity College Dublin. It was a mortal sin to study in Trinity College unless you got a special dispensation from Archbishop McQuaid. In 1967, Trinity College had 3,000 students and about 800 of them were Catholics, but most of them were from Britain. The conditions of McQuaid's permission included that you would regularly attend Catholic Mass, that you would avoid college societies that would lead you astray, that you would study the Catholic version of any social or other philosophy that you're taught in the college, and that you would consort with Catholic friends. Up until the 1970s, when women got married, they had to leave a lot of public sector jobs. In July 1973, the barriers to women continuing to work after marriage were removed, but the church opposed it. You see, women who work have confidence and their own income and might start to demand control over their own reproductive health, contraception for example, which the church also opposed. A 1968 papal cyclical restated the church's opposition to contraception. For the church, sex was a mechanical act to produce the next generation of working class babies to slave away to keep the Irish rich rich. The church said that condoms would lead to diminished responsibility, that it was an offence against the laws of God and the laws of nature. But if you can't interfere with the laws of God or the laws of nature, why does any priest attend hospital? Why did they take headache tablets? Contraception was actually illegal in Ireland from 1935 to 1980, and even after 1980 it was only available in very limited circumstances. There were censorship laws in place which meant you couldn't even talk about it. Charles Haughey called it an Irish solution to an Irish problem, and it wasn't until 1992 that sales of condoms and contraceptives were allowed. They opposed divorce. During the first divorce referendum in the 80s, Taoiseach Garret Fitzgerald was called into a 5-hour meeting with the bishops where he was lectured on Catholic morality. The divorce referendum failed to go through at that time, and it wasn't until the 90s that women had the right to leave an abusive husband, to walk away from a relationship that wasn't working. They also opposed anyone who didn't live according to that definition of the family. So the church regards homosexuality as an objective disorder, that homosexuals are ordered towards an intrinsic evil, but that the church insists we must treat them with compassion. How can you say that people are ordered towards an intrinsic evil and then say you're compassionate towards them? I suppose it's part of the philosophy of saying we're against the sin but not the sinner. These grotesque homophobic views saw the church stand against the decriminalisation of homosexuality and against the marriage equality referendum. Homosexuality in Ireland was only decriminalised in 1993. Meanwhile, in the 90s, there was a renewed focus on the abuse at the hands of the church. The church opposed the Ferns report because it exposed a whole legacy of child abuse and rape. The Ferns report showed that abusive priests weren't reported to the cops. They were moved from diocese to diocese, from parish to parish, to continue their abuse, leaving behind people with so many scars. People who are still fighting for full compensation from the church. Finally, the church stands against the repeal of the 8th Amendment because they don't want women making their own choices about their own bodies. The French socialist Charles Fourier once said that you can judge a society by how it treats women. But doesn't that really put it up to Ireland? What does it say about our society if we refuse to give women choice? If we refuse to allow women to take hold of their own destiny? For too long, men who sit on golden thrones and preach humility have abused and oppressed our people.